Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome everyone into Garden of Doom, and this week we're welcoming back in Gary Wayne, who's been on the show at least twice before, and he's an author, and he talked with us about one of his books prior and his life's work basically with research. He's also been a member of the Nephilim Anthropology Conference in various degrees, sort of like myself. And he also was kind enough to talk to us about Nazis and the occult, which was really cool. That was a fun show. So check those out. And he recently, within the last year, published the follow-up to his book. So I'm going to let him introduce himself because he's got a very good introduction. He can tell you all about his work, and I'm going to let him do most of the leading. So Gary Wayne, thank you so much for being back on the show.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for inviting me back to your show, and happy to be with you and to hopefully discuss some things that connect some dots or raise some interest with your audience today. So for people who aren't familiar with who I am, I'm a Christian contrarian, as I like to call myself.
There you go.
What that means, it comes around to both sides of the coin on the meaning, but for me, a Christian Berean, and I like to verify everything. I don't accept naturally what somebody says or what somebody says something says or what they saw. So I approach my research biblically and outside the Bible the same way, but I do have a Christian biases, and I take everything back and see how it measures up against what the Bible says. So my first book is called The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Humankind. And that book has been out for 8 or 9 years. It actually sells more books every year.
Wow.
As it gains even more traction. It's unusual, and I said I would never write a sequel to that book. But book one was probably the most unique book on the market in terms of this subject, because it connects the complete story of, however you want to classify angels as what type of being, gods, angels, aliens, whatever. It takes that sort of notion and links it with the creation of humankind and the creation of giants. And I link the dots in book one about all the different data points in polytheism and monotheism, show where they're the same, show where they're different, and walk that through history and prehistory and into the modern times, and what those groups and organizations that were formed in the past are planning to do right now, what they're doing right now, and how they want to bring about the end time or the new age or the new Atlantis. There's a whole bunch of different terms out there for it. So I said it, I would never, and what I did in book one is I didn't want to come across, even though it's from Christian biases, I didn't want to have people think I might be manipulating what other people's belief systems are. So I let them speak in their own words in book one. So it's kind of a globalist sort of look at our common history and legacy, where we are and where we're going. And what I said after writing book one is, because I had other books I wanted to write, I would never write a sequel to book one because I don't want to be redundant. It's an 800-page book.
Right.
It's not a small read, and it's just loaded with information. But the Christian community came to me over and over and over and over and over. And what I mean by that is through questions on shows, through social media, through emails. I spend 4, 5, 6 hours a day just responding to emails, answering people's questions. Is that there's an angst and a void in the Christian community that the churches do not teach prehistory and they do not teach prophecy. They don't teach great values, but they don't teach the greater context. So after a while, I decided maybe I should listen to the audience and give them what they're looking for. And what they want is a book that was targeted directly at Christians. But if you don't have to be a Christian to read this book, and you don't have to read book one to read book two or vice versa, but one will lead you to want to read the others. So book two is not out yet. It's got a release date of March 12th. The first printing sold out. They're on the second and third runs right now. You can pre-order through Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, Amazon.ca, Kindle versions, just as you can do that with book one, or you can go to my website at Genesis6conspiracy.com. That's the number 6conspiracy.com, and on that website I have a generous excerpt of all 98 chapters of book one and all 84 chapters of book two. So book one goes deeper in, book two goes deeper into the Bible than any other researcher or writer that I'm familiar has, and in a way that other people haven't done it. And it is a book that, if you're interested in giants, I'm going to talk about more giants than most people outside the Bible or from within the Christian community have ever heard. So if you look at the table of contents, you're going to see names of tribes that you don't recognize as tribes. I'm going to show how we know that they're tribes, who the patriarch was, and in many cases, who the celestial mafia godfather was. And so I'm going to talk about the angelic hierarchy, both loyal and fallen.
Can we take a pause and because you've covered a lot in there, and I've got some follow-up questions for you. Yeah. One is the most basic of basics, and that is, when you say giants, there's two interpretations of giants. One is actually giant in size and stature, anywhere, depending on who you talk to, 6.5 feet to 30 feet to 300 feet. And then there's sort of the giants, like a giant person of history. So sort of like the Greek notion of the heroes of old, the great men of renown. And they don't necessarily need to be larger in stature, though they probably are. I mean, the Greek heroes were all demigods, though Odysseus, I guess, was shorter and strong, but, Hercules was sort of an Ajax, and Achilles. So which version are we talking about? Giants of great size or giants of sort of great historic nature, or some combination?
Well, and in book two, I'm going to cover off some of those designations. So it's kind of all of the above. So the first thing that, when somebody wants to look at understanding chronology in prehistory or giants in prehistory, it's important to put in an event that is in all cultures, on all continents, all around the world. It's called the flood.
Right.
And there are gods before the flood, and there are gods after the flood. So one are parent gods, and the other set are the offspring gods that take over. So Zeus is an offspring god who rules after the flood, who creates, as you say, Hercules through climbing, and he is a demigod and he is a giant. So in this understanding that there's giants that were created before the flood by the gods, and giants created again after the flood. So Gilgamesh, for example, is 6th generation after the flood, son of King Lugalbanda of Uruk, and created by the mother goddess Nin or Ninsun, depending on which translation that you're reading. And then there's a book of Enoch that includes another Gilgamesh before the flood. So it's not uncommon to have giants named after the flood, after giants that lived before the flood. But there's two different sets of giants. One is the Nephilim, biblically, which means a giant, tribe of giants, a bully, or a tyrant. And so the people that say, well, they weren't really all that tall, they just go to bully and tyrant. Well, all of those words have a meaning. So if you look at the Greek history again, and Achilles would have been 12 feet tall by the records of the Greek mythology, Orontes would have been 12 feet tall. Post-Diluvian giants tend to be somewhere from about 12 to 19 feet tall, with Gilgamesh being the largest one documented at 11 cubits tall and 4 cubits wide. As king of Uruk, he'd be measured on 21 inches, which would put him 19 feet tall, and it would make him 7 feet wide. These are giants that generally had a 2-to-1 height to width ratio, so not only tall, but wide, like strong, muscular, and stout, as they're described in the Bible. And so the Nephilim, before the flood, were larger. How large gets to be speculative. So if you look at the book of Enoch, for example, if you take the older version translated by Alexander Bruce, the Giaz version, it has 300 L's in it. So we don't know how big an L is. It's an ancient unit, but we can't verify what that is. The Aramaic version, which is a little bit shorter than the Giaz version, in the book of Enoch, says 300 cubits.
Okay.
And if you were to measure a standard cubit of 1.5 versus a royal cubit of 18 inches, now you're talking like 450 feet.
Right.
I don't think they're 450 feet tall. I think they were larger than the post-Diluvian giants, but not that big. So let's say 20 to 40 feet. Some people might say as big as 100 feet. We really don't have evidence for that size, other than you have reliefs that are all throughout the world, and particularly in the Middle East. Then you get different sizes. You have gods that are really big, then you have giants, and then you have humans. And
right, kings, pharaohs.
What classification you want to make on those.
What about in Gilgamesh itself? There's, I mean, him and Enkidu go to kill the giant Umbaba, which means that if Gilgamesh is looking for a giant, that's got to be a giant bigger than Gilgamesh. He's not looking for himself. So do they say how big Umbaba is? I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly.
No, they don't, but they give his description, and he's a chimera type of giant.
Okay.
So something unique, and he has the special protection of the gods. And he's ruling at the cedar forest at Mount Hermon, where the assembly of the gods, or Nippur, would be as understood from the Sumerian variation. And that's where the council of the Baalim also ruled from after the flood, when this story would have taken place, with Gilgamesh as being a post-Diluvian giant. And they're the creators of the Rephaim giants, which are the post-Diluvian giants.
Okay. And I've heard Raphaim, I've heard Gaborim, I've heard Anakim. Because, you know what, I have a question that is on topic, but not on this part of the topic. And that is, you said you got a lot of questions from the Christian community. Now, I'm American, I'm pretty sure you're Canadian. So, you know, I have a very Americanized version of, you know, what I think of, different versions of Christianity. And, my brain goes straight to either Catholic or evangelical, and there's like 30,000 different denominations of Christianity. I'm wondering, first, where did you get inquiries from all over the world? Is this like a international kind of, okay, so it was. And is there any particular denomination denomination of Christianity that inquired more than the others, or is it spread out sort of evenly?
Yeah, I take to more from a lesser degree, there'd be lesser Roman Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
There are Catholics that I talk to, and I do Catholic shows as well, but less from that community. Other than that, it's very widely dispersed, and it's more from just the dissatisfaction that they have questions and they're not getting answers from the church. So I wanted to finish off, you asked that question, like, how do we know they're giants? And right. I gave some sizes there. And I mentioned the definition of Nephilim, which was in tyrant goes back to Greek tyrannos, and that's part of the Gyges or Gaies, plural, singular, depending on the pronunciation of the G and the vowel following. So Gaies with the Y sound is a plural sound. So these are Gyges kings, just as you have Gaies and a Gyges, gigantic creation by Gaia that has, all of these heads and arms and things, and that's got a root word of the Greek word Gyges, and so that means giant in Greek mythology, and so the name of the Gigantes or Giantes in plural, both are source words for the word giant in English from Greek, are taken as names that are transplanted over to these demigod kings. So you have these Gyge kings. And you have a line from Hercules, which was the Herculides kings, which are Gyge kings, as well as other giant bloodlines of kings throughout the Middle East out of Greece of that particular period of time. And they were known as tyrants or tyrannos.
Mm-hmm.
And so tyrannos as a synonym for giant is reflecting that type of being. And bully in most polytheist cultures, and particularly itemized in the Ugaritic texts, the Baalim and their parent gods were called bulls as a term in terms of a god, and their offspring, the giants, both before and after the flood, were also known as bulls. So when you see the term bulls of Bashan or bulls of Mount Hermon in the Bible, it's either referring to the gods or their spiritual offspring or both.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you see the term bully, that is another term, not meaning that they're not a giant. So after the flood, two classifications of giants. One being the pure ones that are created, in this case, the Rephaim, which are created by Baal and Ashtaroth. And then biblically, you have other tribes, and there's many names, like the Anakim, which has a different patriarch as a giant. His name is Arba. And he's also listed in the Bible. But they're also declared as Rephaim as well. So in Deuteronomy 2, where you see the Anakim, the Zamzuzim, the Emim, the Horim as giants, that word is Rapha, singular, Rephaim, plural, not Nephilim. So these are post-Diluvian giants and different tribes of giants. And typically the giant tribes were patriarchally, took their name from a patriarch or eponymously named. So you can start to track many of these different tribes. Rapha is a tribe that's listed in Genesis 14 and Genesis 15 as giants, one in the War of Giants, the other one in the land that's being promised to Abraham, that includes the mighty 7 and the mighty 10. All are giants and hybrids. So these tribes are not listed in the Table of Nations, even though they're recorded in the Bible, because Rephaim names aren't listed in the Table of Nations. So you have 9 Canaanites tribes of Canaanites that don't have a patriarch: the Amorites, the Jebusites, and the full 9. Their names are taken from a Rephaim patriarch.
Okay.
And named eponymously. And so Canaan is named, his son Heth and Sidon are named, but then you have these tribes. These are, as they're taken back, family of nations, or Mahash, which means a kind or a different species. So these are 7 to 9 feet tall, according to the Egyptian execration text. And they lived amongst the Anakim and the other giant nations of the Middle East, but as a smaller giant. So hybrid giants is what they were understood as.
Did you find this all in, say, the King James Bible, or did you have to look into the Russian Orthodox and the Ethiopian, or did you go into, I guess, other Gospels, or sometimes was some considered non-canonical Book of Enoch and Jubilees and Book Enoch 2 and all of that stuff?
The names of these giant tribes are all in the Bible that I'm talking about.
Okay, so they would be
which Bible that you go to. But one of the things I also do is I take the King James Version back to the original Hebrew and the original Hebrew meaning, and to Greek in the New Testament as well, so that you get a better understanding. But I mean, just some of the names that let's say Hurrian is a type of people that was in the Middle East. Well, that's a branch of the Hori. And there's 3 branches of the Hori. And the Hori lived in the Mount Seir area in southern Covenant land. And the Hurim, as it would be called from Huri, Churiy in the original transliterated Hebrew with H being silent, lived in the Syrian to the Mesopotamian region. So a branch. And some of the Horim also lived in the north as well. And then there's the Hivim. So the 3 branches that were very, very closely associated, I cover them. But there's also tribes like the Perizim. You have the Amalekim. You have the Zuzim. I already covered Zamzuzim and Emim. You have Geshurim, Gerzim, Makathim, Avim, Kenazim, Kenim, Kadmanim, Gebalim, Pelathim, Captorim, Kalyohim, and more names.
There will not be a test after the show.
Yeah, there will not be a test. And I will cover all of these giants off and how we know that these are tribes of giants. So there's so much that's written in the Bible that most people just sort of, pass over and don't really let resonate who they are. And once you start to dig into who they are, it starts to make a whole lot of sense, not only of biblical history, but of worldwide history.
Now, I've heard of the Hurrians, and from a purely historical, non-biblical, I believe it's been absolutely established that they exist and existed, and that they were a terror. Now, what I have heard on history podcasts is that they were a terror because they had war chariots and used war horses, and nobody, in the region was using that yet. Now, the fact that they're also giants would add to that terror, and the fact that they're giants is not mutually exclusive of using horses and war chariots, though it would seem to me that if you're a giant, the horse is sort of outmatched. I don't know. I'm not even sure what to ask you. I guess just how do you respond or address that?
Yeah, and I cover this off in the books because it's important information, and I'm glad that you're aware of that, and it's important. So I call these tribes, and there's many tribes outside the covenant land as well, as Rephaim, but they are understood after the flood as 4 or 5, depending on which historian that you're talking about, groups of Indo-Aryans. And these Indo-Aryans and Scythians would be another understanding as being one of those groups of those Indo-Aryans. But all of the Indo-Aryans had a mastership of horse riding. And so most of their beginnings after the flood in terms of military supremacy begins with their ability to work with the horse and shoot bows, fight off of it, and their size. But then they add chariots. But then they do more than just add chariots. They add iron to the weapons, and they add iron to the chariots. So now you have the size, you have this great number, and you have these super weapons of the ancient world, and they just start toppling all of the realms that don't have it. And intermixed amongst that group that's inheriting these iron chariots and the use of this of horsemanship in a way that had not been seen before, perhaps before the flood, but not after the flood, are the Hyksos. And they're also classified amongst the Amal and the Shamal, who are the ones that are going to overthrow the Egyptian empire of that particular period, because they have that superiority in the weaponry, and they don't even have to fight them.
Right, and I've heard of the Hyksos too, from Ralph Ellis, who I know you're acquainted with, among others. But like different people say that they were like the shepherd conquerors or the goat conquerors, but that apparently it's like a mistranslation. It was more like, but they also were sort of, I think they were recruited as mercenaries first, and then they sort of took over, or I forget the exact story or the exact historic version.
So you can make a connection back to both Egyptian, Hebrew, and other language to a shepherd relationship as kind of an allegory to their names. And so it's like an allegory of the Fisher King.
Right.
priest king, as you take that sort of further into that polytheist belief system. And that they had a city and a location of people of the Shamau, and probably, I would say, of the Zuzim as well, already in Abaris before they show up. And it goes back beyond the rise of the Hyksos in Egypt, but they're the southern bloodline of the northern Amau. Okay. So they're interrelated and family, and so they already had that base there.
Is that Amorites, the Amau, the Amorites?
No.
Nope.
This is spelled A-A-M-U.
Okay, just sounds similar to me.
It is similar, and I was looking for an etymological match for the phonetic aspect of it, but I couldn't make that match.
Sure, that's fine.
But it doesn't mean that there isn't a connection back to Amaru as a Baleen god of the Ugaritic texts, right? That also created giants, and so there's a possibility that there's a connection there, but I couldn't get enough information to sort of make that link.
Okay, so
it's important to know for people that there are a northern branch and the southern branch as the Egyptians understood these giants.
Let me try to dumb it down a little bit, and you tell me if I got it right. So before the floods, there were already giants, some of great stature, some of great strength, not necessarily with the stature, but it really doesn't matter. And they were the older gods. They were the Titans. The first, almost every mythology has at least one, if not three generations of gods before it gets to the gods that, humans start to interact with, at least biblically and mythologically. And those are post-Diluvian, and some of them are pre-Diluvian rather, and some of those survive the flood. After the flood, you have the so before the flood, you have Adam and Eve, metaphorical or literal. You have a lot of begetting, but somewhere in there, I'm not exactly sure when, because it basically comes on page 2, and the begetting comes after. So I'm presuming that it's at the multiple daughters that Adam and Eve have, that the angels or whatever you call them, the sons of God come down, again, maybe Titans, and they have or at this point maybe they're the Olympians. I don't know what we're trying to keep in the. I guess they want to stay in Greek mythology, just keep the vernacular the same, without telling the world that it's specifically the Greeks, the Greek pantheon. And then they had the demigods, the heroes, and then the floods came because some of them went crazy, or some of them were just born bad, or whatever it is, and people were tempted by them. So there was a flood, either whether it was natural or God was unhappy, and some of them.
Theism, it's the gods, not the God of the Bible, that bring the flood.
That's true.
Depends on the lens that you're looking at.
Yes, God plural or gods, but the old gods or new, whichever you like, were unhappy and caused the flood, and some of those also survived the flood. So we have some pre-Diluvian giants that survived the flood, and some post-Diluvian giants that still. Well, I guess all the post-Diluvian giants survived the flood by definition, but some of them were the original giants, and some of them were the second generation, and some of them were the hybrid. So there's 3 generations of different kinds of giants.
So directionally, you've got a snapshot there.
And I've been confused myself while I was talking, as people heard me wrestling with myself trying to figure this out.
And when we're using Greek mythology to keep the terms right, is an Olympian god is classified as an antediluvian or post-diluvian, because the offspring gods after the flood just rise up to replace the ones that were ruling before. So they ruled from the same mountains. There's holy mountains all around the world. Whether or not there's one that's a center, or there was 7 or more, it's hard to really know, but it's the same story all around, and it seems to be the same pantheon all around the world, just different vernacular names. So, and when we're talking about the gods, they are called Titans for sure, but so are their offspring called Titans. So So offspring gods, they're called Titans, parent gods, and the spurious offspring with human females and human males were also called Titans. So Atlas, for example, is both a hero and a Titan. And he's a demigod, offspring of Poseidon in the mythos by Platos and Critias, and Clymene. So you have to be careful with the terms, but the demigods still thought of themselves as gods in the physical form on Earth. So there's just sort of a different classification of Titan. Hero or demigod would be the best way to understand the giants, though. And demigod, as it comes down in its etymology, means, and its ancient meaning means the offspring of a human and a god.
Let me try to take a shot at this, maybe through a Christian or more monotheistic religious perspective, and see if I'm right. So the Titans on Earth that interacted with humans would be what we would call abominations or monsters, whereas the demigods might be more of where the heroes might be more of the demons, the Belial or Ozymandias or Azazel, Samael. The fallen angels became they're what we call demons, but they're nothing more than the offspring. No.
Yeah. Again, so. And terms are thrown out there very loosely, and it really gets confusing for people. So
that's me.
Yeah. So yeah, in monotheism there are angels, loyal or fallen, and there are their spurious offspring, and they passed on their biblically, as we would understand it, as counterfeit spirit into those beings, and when those beings' bodies died, they became demons.
Okay.
They disembodied evil spirits. And so even in Greek mythology, when one of their heroes died who ruled a city, they would do all sorts of sacrifices and things because they knew this disembodied spirit would come back and haunt them and do horrible things to them, and they're trying to pacify them because they can no longer interact in the world. The difference from a monotheist perspective is that these aren't gods. These aren't beings that are divine. They're still of the physical world. They have a counterfeit spirit. And that human spirits sleep when we die. And the soul and the body stays here and decomposes, but the spirit goes back to heaven. Counterfeit spirits lose their soul and their body, but their spirits, because it's counterfeit, aren't permitted to go into the sleep state back into heaven. So they become these disembodied spirits, which is where that hero worship comes from in Greek mythology, which matches up in similar accounts all around the world, just by different sort of names. So it's important to understand that Satan, as the chief angel, who sits over the other angels and has different traits, he is also known as the devil, Diablos, which is also the leader of the demons, but they report to him in the hierarchy, just as all the angels in the hierarchy report up to Satan that sits at the head of the pantheon.
Well, still bureaucracy and mid-level management, even and
yeah, it's more looked at as a host, which is Hebrew Saba for an army, so an army of angels, loyal or rebellious, and that has rank and order.
I have a couple other questions, and they're not necessarily in any particular order, but I don't want to forget them. One is, who are the Geburim? And way back when you said that Baal and Ashura are the patriarch and matriarch of at least one of the lines of giants. Now, I know who Baal is, I know who Ashura is, but I know, but Baal, it was I guess the fertility god, whatever, of Canaanites, Akkadians, maybe Babylonians. I'm not even sure about the Babylonians. But also Ashur was also the consort, supposedly, of Yahweh, which was the, surprise, surprise, that the Israelites and the Hebrews were polytheists way before they were monotheists, and Yahweh was, sort of their Zeus. Is Yahweh and Baal actually the same character, or are there two Ashuras, or was Ashur with both of them, or what's up there?
I'm not sure who you're referring to when you're saying Ashur. Is that like Assur?
I think Ashura, Ashura, or Ashura.
Ahura, maybe out of Zoroastrianism.
Maybe there's a lot of language drift and word drift, but I thought the consort of what you said. Maybe I misheard you, but the wife of Baal or the consort. Yes, and I thought isn't that the same name as what is rumored to be the consort of Yahweh or El?
El, yes, but not Yahweh.
Okay.
So El is the parent god of Baal through Ashtaroth and a couple other similar sort of transliterated names. So El is the Hebrew word for an angel or a god, generically speaking. And in this case, it's the head of the parent god pantheon takes the name El, which would be considered in monotheism the counterfeit of El Elyon, the God Most High. And El, as it's used in monotheism, is if it's in the lower case, it's for a god or an angel. If it's in the superlative case, it's for God the Father. Or Elohim in the superlative state could also be a singular application for God the Father or the tripart nature, depending on the application. So El is just a generic word that's also transliterated as Al, Il, Ilu, several others transliterations around the Middle East. So Baal means Lord God, because Al is that transliteration, but he is in polytheism a son of Ashtaroth and El. In monotheism, it's the word Yahweh of the Elohim, or the word logos of the Theos God, as it's in the New Testament, is the creator of all things at God's command. He's the word. And so in John 1, Colossians 1, all beings created, including El of the Canaanite pantheon, or Baal, because I don't think they produced offspring gods. I think they're just lower level gods that moved up in rank, but that's my biases, would also be part of the creation of those angels in prehistory.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
So, yeah, so what the terms are similar, but the context is really sort of important. And
so if El is Zeus, Baal would be like Apollo.
No. So El would be Kronos.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Or Uranus, depending on which version of the Greek prehistory that you're using. So Ashtaroth would be equivalent to Gaia, or Gaia in that understanding. Baal, as a post-Diluvian god, head of the pantheon, head of the council of gods at Mount Hermon, or Sappon, as it's called in the Ugaritic text, that also has the assembly of the Datanu, the giant tribes, which is the sort of transliteration of Tuatha Danan. I won't go into how I get there, but I cover that off in book 2. So Baal would be equivalent to Zeus. Baal would be equivalent to Osiris.
Gotcha.
Baal would be equivalent to Enki or Enlil, depending on which one you think headed the Sumerian pantheon, whereas Kronos would be equivalent to Anu in the Sumerian pantheon, or El in the Canaanite pantheon.
I was off by a generation. Okay.
Yeah.
Conceptually right, generationally wrong. Yeah. And the Gaborim, are they another tribe, or are they something else entirely? And I ask this because Reverend Jim Williamson describes them as something entirely else. And then I've seen both, that they are a tribe of giants, or that they were just generically referred to as the giants or heroes of old, like, which would be pre-Diluvian, and I'm not sure.
In Genesis 6:4, where you have the giants, the Nephilim giants, if you're reading a KJV, goes back to Nephil, Nephilim, the I am male plural, were the mighty ones of old.
Right.
And mighty one, it goes back to the Hebrew word in singular as Gabor. And then the plural is Gibborim, and the female would be Gibborah. And so Gibborim or Gibor is used in the Old Testament about 158 times, not always for giants. It's a description of giants for the most part. There's one verse only in the Bible, in the book of Job, in chapter 16, where you see the word giant in the KJV, and it goes back to Gibor or Gibborim. Gabor would be because it's a specific giant. So whether that's a giant or not, I'll leave that up for speculation. But typically, the giants in the Bible are called Nephilim, Raphaim, or specifically by the tribe. But there is a tribe, and in the Old Testament, it can also just mean strong or noble. So it could be applied to humans, and it is. Like, for example, the mighty ones of David, same word, but they weren't giants. So you can make an argument, the Makathite or the Makathim, that is a giant there, or Uriah the Hittite is a hybrid giant, but the Israelites genealogically aren't giants.
Yeah, well, David had to beat Goliath, right? Obviously, David's not a giant.
Yeah, exactly. So now in the Ugaritic, and also it also be described to use the strength of God or angels, or excel as angels are also described as. So you have to be careful with the applications of the meanings. And the context is really important. Now, in the Ugaritic text, in this assembly of the Tatanu, the tribes of the giants, the dynastic kings that are answering to the assembly of gods headed by Baal after the flood, that King Og, for example, would be part of, who also ruled over after the War of Giants, Ashtaroth and Edrei in Bashan in the mountain region, moving from his home city, Ugarit, to Mount Hermon. Connect all of that in Book 2 for people. Is a tribe that is GBR. In Hebrew, it comes out of Old Semitic. In Old Hebrew and Old Semitic, there weren't any vowels. So you would have Nephilim as NPL or Raphaim as RPL. The H comes in later and the phonetic F sound comes in later, but originally it would be Nepal or Raphael or Repel, depending on how you want to pronounce that. So now you have GBR. And it's also used as a description of these giants as well, but there's one specific tribe that's GBR or Gabor. So typically I say Gibor is just a description of strength and used in that sort of application to describe giants. But there is that one application that maybe that word derives from, is these powerful one tribe of giants that are listed in the Ugaritic text. So I'm open to that.
Are any of them Jaja or Ava?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, no Jaja Gabor or no Ava Gabor. No. Oh, that's sort of unfortunate. Okay. Or maybe well, I don't know. They're both deceased, I believe.
But here's what's interesting is the J can be also pronounced as a Y. So with that name, it could be Yah, double Yah, the short version of Yahweh or Yehovah.
There. See, now you're being me, though. Now you're getting dangerous. now you're just taking things that sound the same and getting things wrong.
You're looking for interesting connections on names.
Sure, I mean that's always fun, but I've been counseled many times that that's dangerous to do from people of various schools of thought. So and it hasn't stopped me, but I'm a podcast. The guests are the subject matter expert. I'm just the straw person for the audience. Is really all it is. Okay, so I guess probably the natural step here would be. I guess I know it's impossible to do a recap of 94 chapters, but, what is the main thesis of book 1 and then take us into sort of the, book 2, what sort of you're talking about there. I mean, look, I could talk about tribes all day long, but I'm not sure the audience, this is almost like a college lecture, and I'm not sure that they want to hear me, getting giddy about different reams and yeah.
Yeah, well, the one thing I do differently than a lot of people who talk on giants is I give the basis and the meat and the detail from the history, not just from the Bible, but other sources. So I'm a little bit unique that way. So yeah, it's a good question in terms of what's the difference between book 1 and book 2. So book 1 is to introduce people that there is a ancient organizational structure that is created that has dominated our world in the past, to identify those organizational structures, their belief systems, the types of beings and descendants of those beings that have worked together to shape our prehistory, history, and shaping the world today and taking it into a specific direction, no matter which lens that you come from on it. It's the veracity of this conspiracy to bring about this new age, whatever you think the end or the outcome of that is going to be. But I do it from a Christian biases. And in there I talk about the giants and the bloodlines of the giants and the House of Dragon.
Yeah.
And so book 2, which is more, and it's done more from a globalist perspective, connecting dots from around the world in prehistory, history, today, and into the future. Book 2 is designed for Christians, but it's to go a little bit different direction, and it's more about the post-Diluvian giants and the bloodlines than the antediluvian. And its purpose, just as the subtitle is how understanding prehistory and giants helps to define end-time prophecy. I'm going to provide not only huge context and all of the giant wars that are listed in the Bible that most people don't think are giant wars, but provide the context of the prehistory to define end-time prophecy in a fuller context, and to show how the giants are connected, how the angels are connected, how the demons are connected to end-time prophecy. So it's a walk through prehistory unlike what anybody has seen before, and then it connects into how all of those terms, beings, and definitions explain some of the allegory of end-time prophecy.
Okay. So then I think we probably have to talk a little bit about end-time prophecy. And end-time prophecy, there's a whole bunch of different versions. There's, of course, the book of Revelations. There's the prophetic dreams or visions. There's the sometimes considered canonical and sometimes not considered canonical, depending on what religious denomination you belong to or your own personal beliefs. And then there's sort of what's become the popular version of it, which seems to have combined a bunch of them into one. And I'll just call it, because of my ignorance, I'm just going to call it the evangelical, lumping probably another 10,000 groups as one, with probably 10,000 different beliefs as one. But I've also, I know enough just to be dangerous, and that's why, I'm not in the ministry, one of the many reasons. But I was told that there's 3 schools of thought with end of days. One is that we are premillennial, meaning we haven't gotten to the point of the first big war, where then there's going to be 1,000 years of the rule of, let's just say, Christ. And then there's the bigger war, or the final war. Some people say that we're millennial. We are in that 1,000 years. The first war already happened, and we're waiting for the next war, which I guess would be end times. And then there's yet a third that says we're post-millennial, which means that the final war has happened or we're in the final war. I guess A, is that your understanding or belief? And B, which one do you think we're in, if any? Yeah, we're definitely not in the millennium right now, as the preterists would say, and the Tartarian mixing into preterism, to the various kinds of preterism today, and the loss of memory and history and all the assorted things that go along with that. And I don't belong to any one of the standard eschatological groups. Okay. And I'll explain why. But if you were to want to kind of peg me in there, we're before the millennium. Okay. And we might be in the fig tree generation or the end time. But we're not in the last 7 years. So, problem with eschatological approaches or prophetic approaches in the Bible, and by the way, there are polytheist prophecies, like the Sibylline prophecies. It's part of polytheism. Oh, sure. Again, they have end time predictions as well, just, again, that different sort of outcome that goes with the religion. But my approach is completely different, and so it's getting to have a lot of attraction, because when I first got into saying, okay, I want to understand a little bit about prophecy, if I'm going to work in the Bible, I want to understand about prophecy. And so I did all my own work, and then I learned about all of these approaches out there. And I thought, okay, well, that makes sense. Maybe it can show me whether or not I'm in the right direction or not. And what I found is a number of different things is that all of them do some ridiculous things. One is, they leave out all inconvenient passages that don't support the preconceived conclusions. Right. Which is, has no credibility. Everything has to fit, or your approach is wrong. It's as simple as that. Another thing that they tend to do is
mean what they want it to mean.
Right.
Which, again, it has to not have any conflict. So you can't have any conflicts, and you can't leave out inconvenient passages. And then it whittles it down. And there are groups that say they put everything around what Jesus said, but then they reinvent what Jesus said.
Okay.
So what I found is if this is the Word of God, and I think it is, the Word of Yahweh, the Word who is Yahweh, then Old Testament, New Testament, Revelation, Matthew 24, doesn't matter where it comes in, it all has to fit. So there needs to be a template. So the template I use is I put everything around what Jesus said in Matthew 24. Now Mark has an oration, so I put the additional details that Mark provides onto 24, and then Luke 17 and 21 in the same way. And if you do that, you can put in any Old Testament prophecy into that chronology, and he provides us the chronology. When you take that back to the Greek word where it says then, it actually means that. It's the Greek word toda. It's the then, it's the when. It doesn't mean anything else. So you list it in chronological order. And the book of Revelation is the testimony of Jesus Christ given to the angel to show John. So it has to fit, and it does. Just separate the letters as part of the prophecy. That's for the churches, and also understand there's going to be some things that aren't fulfilled in the time of the churches, which is a type of prophecy that I call a dual prophecy that I do in book 2. And this is a vision prophecy like the Daniel prophecy, but it has a mix-in of the dual prophecies. And there's different kinds of prophecies as well. So those are a couple of them. And then Revelation 6 to about Revelation 14, 7, or 8 is your first 3.5 years, or the midpoint of the abomination that's talked about Matthew 24. Then you get a summary of, in exact order, of the last 3.5 years, which happens after the abomination in Matthew 24. And that details out Revelation 15 through 19, and then you have the millennium. And again, you have the word kahi, which is great for and that's used as it's giving you the event, the next event, and it can only be used in a chronological way. So people who want to mix match and say you can't overlay it onto what Jesus said, you can. You just have to let it, and then all your conflicts will go away. So I demonstrate that in book 2 for people, and all the terms like Babylon, who Antichrist is, what that means, how we know it's going to come out of the past, all the types of catastrophes that are coming. This is all explained to us in prehistory. We just need to take those applications. And in Jesus' oration, he talks about the days of Noah. And Noah lived 600 years before the flood, 350 years after the flood. There's giants on both sides of the flood, and the angels, or as an alien mythos, aliens walked amongst us both before and then again shortly after the flood and mysteriously disappeared. It's the same story, just your perspective on who these beings are. And we need to understand everything that happened. And when it says the earth was violent and there's going to be violence in the end time, that's a reference to the creation of the giants who created all of these wars and their angelic technology that they received. The gods provide all the knowledge all around the world. The book of Enoch says the knowledge was provided by the watchers who rebelled. And this technology creates the technology to destroy the world through war. And that's the violence that's being talked about. We know this angelic technology was advanced in the word corrupt. The whole earth was corrupt, not the sea. The whole earth was corrupted. And that means to, that's the Hebrew shakaf, for decay, pervert, ruin, words like that. So all the plant genomes, all of the human DNA, the intermixing of the races, why only certain kinds or specific animals of each species that were uncorrupted were called to the ark and selected to start anew without that sort of corruption. So we're approaching that technology again today. And I think we're being handed a lot of that technology that's bringing it about. So anyways, I got off track there a little bit. But understand that when you ask about all of the eschatological approaches, I agree, and they frustrate me because I deal in the Christian community, and they're not interested in, trying to look at what you're trying to do. All they're trying to do is they give you these chase the rabbit arguments. You answer that in terms of why they're supporting theirs, and it doesn't make any sense. They never come back and answer it. And eventually you just have to say, I'll answer X amount of questions for you, but why don't you just do it this way? You don't have to worry about reinventing everything. So, and I'm not saying I'm a prophet. I'm not. I'm a researcher. And I just wanted to understand it in a way that would make sense and that would not have conflicts. And I'm not doing anything to manipulate it. I'm just putting the details of the narratives together as they're assembled in the Bible.
Well, there was a phrase in there, and I think I know what you mean, but I'm not sure. And you're talking about that one of the issues was the mixing of the races. Now, in the context of our conversation, I'm assuming that means the mixing of these angelic and godlike and giant races with, regular humans. I assume that doesn't mean, what we falsely call different races on this earth, whatever, Caucasian, Negroid, Mongoloid, and which is just
different species is a better word for that intermixing.
But that's not the mixing of the races that you're referring. You're talking about like the gods, angels, giants, whatever term you want to use. So the extra humans.
Chimera beings that they did in Greek mythology, which they use the term to do the same thing today.
Yeah, and I want to clarify that, one for my sake, but also for yours. I mean, because sometimes when I have you go, oh, he's against mixing of the races. I'm like, he doesn't mean what you think he doesn't mean like he doesn't mean like African American marrying a white American. He's talking about like giants and demons and like Zeus, intermingling with humans. So okay. I just wanted to get it from your words. Sheesh, I forgot okay, so I remembered it now. I hear from a lot of people in a lot of different corners, and I expect it, on this show, Garden Doom, but outside Garden of Doom, just people I know from the regular world who should listen to my podcast, that don't, just because they're my friends and don't, that somehow something is happening around 2027 and it's going to culminate in 2030. And I've heard different versions of how this prophecy and how the math worked. The words and the reality of those time periods don't make sense to me, so I don't know how you get there, but I don't need to go through that. What is the basis of that? And you already told us that we're not in the final 7 years, so obviously we're not in a 2027 to 2030 something really bad is going to happen, because the final 7 years we'd be within that. It's 2024. So I guess what's that 2027 2030 thing, and how do you know that whatever the event horizon isn't that close?
So in the last 50 years there's been so many of these dates that are set out. Christians and non-Christians,
sure.
Globalists and Christians. What's going on is that there is a push to bring about this new age or the end time, but it's struggling to get its agenda done, so it keeps sort of getting reset. And so 2027 is sort of one of the numbers that I'm hearing. So let's say, for example, a main event is President Xi talking about he's going to take Taiwan by 2027.
Mm-hmm.
So these are important events, but it's not the end time.
Right.
And from an end time perspective on how they want to bring it about, the globalist forces, they want 10 groups of nations around the world, 10 empires. The new Atlantis, just as Atlantis ruled in the Golden Age when these beings, the angelic or alien beings, walked amongst us and they created their divine offspring with the divine right to rule and everything that goes along with it. They're trying to recreate that in the image of Francis Bacon's New Atlantis. And so that's the New Age, or the Reich, as Hitler tried to bring about, however you want to describe it. It's all directionally talking about the same thing. So we haven't seen those 10 empires show up yet.
Right.
In the Bible, we're told there's 10 toes, 10 kings, 10 horns, all the same imagery for this seventh end-time beast empire that will make the way going for Antichrist, who is crowned at the midpoint of the last 7 years. So that hasn't risen. And we haven't seen the universal religion rise yet.
Mm-hmm.
This is the woman who rides the beast of nations in the book of Revelation. Babylon is rooted in the Hebrew word Babel, and the religion that Nimrod imposed on all the Noahites as an Antichrist archetype type figure at Babel, before the languages were confused and the people were separated. And he implemented the Enochian mysticism from before the flood. And that's the religion of Gnosticism, Zoroastrianism, all the different sort of polytheists, the original pantheon that was worshipped before the flood. And so we haven't seen this universal religion yet rise, and it's going to control these seven kings, so much so they're going to grow jealous, and they're going to give their power over to Antichrist, overthrow Babylon to set up his own religion and world government. It's the eighth empire, so that hasn't happened yet. To start the last 7 years in Daniel 9:27, and we know it's in the end time, even though the preterists want to leave out the verse before where it says the time of the end and the whole week is complete in 9:27. That's the Hebrew word ketch, which means the end time, the last days. I mean, you just can't just say, okay, that's not there,
right?
When all things are going to be fulfilled, as it's talked about within the 70 weeks. That's the week where everything becomes fulfilled. And so, as part of that covenant, this peace treaty that's going to guarantee the peace for Israel, as is a common thought, they are awarded Israel, as we understand them today, the people living in the covenant land will be permitted, and that's the southern kingdom, Judah, versus the lost tribes. So another aspect of prophecy that most people don't want to deal with. They're going to be awarded the ability to do the sacrifices on a wing, an extremity, or overspreading of the temple, depending on which Bible translation that you're reading. Islam is never going to permit that unless there's a universal religion. They won't permit it. And it's not going to be right in that temple. And as Josephus located the temple that was destroyed in 70 AD, it's a little bit closer to the valley. So the wording is perfect for a wing or an extremity and overspreading, but Islam won't permit that as well. They don't even want people to pray at the Wailing Wall. So it's not Islam as this religion. So if I'm right, it's the old pantheon that's coming back together. So it's going to have to bring in all the monotheist religions as well. There is work to be done. So we get there through what Jesus provides as one of the overarching signs to that last generation where everything is fulfilled. And I think if we are in the fig tree generation, it begat in the time of the taking of Jerusalem by modern Israel, so 70 or 120 years after that, depending on the definition, Psalms or Genesis 6:3 for a generation. We could be entering into the 2030s if we are in the fig tree generation, and I say if.
Right.
Because there's still so much to do, but it's guided by the sorrows or the birth pains that get stronger throughout the fig tree generation. That is wars, rumors of war, that is earthquakes, it is famine, and it is pestilence, and they'll all start working together. And it's going to be so horrific as it gets stronger, it's going to look apocalyptic. But we're a ways away from that. But that is going to permit the false prophets, as are understood biblically, or the Sibylline prophets, or the prophets of Mary out of Medjugorje that were initiated, and others to come out, if we are in the fig tree generation, to do prophecies of doom or contrived catastrophes that will cattle hurl the world into the universal religion and the government. So all of that has to come to play first. And so it is this religious nature that we haven't seen yet. We're seeing these apparitions around the world, whether Mary or other types of representatives of the divine mother goddess of polytheism in other cultures. That's really and it's selling the same thing, that we're coming to a different time, and there's going to be catastrophes, and everybody has to convert to the true religion. Okay. That message is going to become clear. None of that has happened yet. Right.
I mean, and arguably there's always war, pestilence, famine, and catastrophes, at some point. I mean,
they have to work together in an ever-increasing way, so that by the time of the last 7 years of the seal opening, 25% destruction happens. Can you imagine what people would say if you had 10% destruction of the whole world and the population? They would say that would be Armageddon. Everybody's going to say, oh, that, and it's not. It's coming, but it gets stronger. The trumpets are 33%. And the contrived catastrophes to destroy this world is going to come to full fruition in the bowl catastrophes of the last year of the last 7 years. And all flesh would be destroyed. It's rooted in the Shiva doctrine and the Phoenix doctrine of polytheism. So Shiva is a destroyer god of the Hindu pantheon.
Right.
Equivalent to Abaddon or Apollyon that's going to come out of the abyss just before the midpoint of the last 7 years. And that ideology says that not only is Shiva a destroyer god, but a creator god. But it creates a new world out of the ashes of the old world. So,
like a phoenix.
Yeah, the phoenix rises out of the ashes. So the world that they're preparing isn't for the humans. It's for the disembodied spirits of their spiritual offspring in a realm where they're going to live away from God.
I'm sure we're both acquainted with some of the same people. I'm sure your circles of acquaintanceship are much larger than mine. But a lot of it, and in what you said, there's a lot of people that are worried about the global cabal. Usually the word elitist is thrown around, which can mean a lot of things. But I'm thinking particularly to the group that's led, sort of the NWO whistleblower group that Leo Zagami's been on the show. He also goes by Leo Young, same person. And his thesis, and maybe it's changed, I don't know, but when I had him on the show, and as far as I know, and I still get the newsletter and I read it every now and then, is that technology is really the tool of Satan, if not Satan itself. However, the strangest thing hit me while you were talking, and that is that if there are in fact 10 leaders, 10 Kabbalists, 10 nations trying to make the biggest threat to them is this new super wealthy class of oligarchs that has nothing to do with old families or bloodlines or whatever, and like the Zuckerbergs, like the Elon Musks, like the people who created Twitter and Google and Microsoft. I'm not sure I'm not thrilled with the division of wealth. I mean, I think it's an untenable situation, generally, but that aside, on a theological basis, it seems like
is small potatoes that they have.
That's small. So those billions or the 1 zillionaire that's out there, that's nothing compared to the wealth of. I mean, Putin is said to be the richest man in the world, but he's not, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Small potatoes. So when I was doing research in the early 2000s, the off the books money, as best as you can get it, and most of it's located in Switzerland, where you can't really get visible access to wealth.
So they think they're big potatoes. They might think they're a bulwark, but they're not. It's false bravado.
Yeah. And I'll sort of come back to that in just a second. I was getting numbers at that time in say 2001, 2002, that the off the books record was a minimum of 300 trillion.
Oh.
And maybe as high as 500 to 700 trillion as estimates, various numbers from different people. And you can only imagine what that size of the number is today. Their wealth, the ones who have, then you practically call them oligarchs. They're just the junior oligarchs. Mm-hmm. And that in the reset, if there's a great reset, those junior oligarchs are going to lose their wealth too, but they're going to be funded to run the new oligarch system after the reset, if they pull off that reset. So when you look at these new oligarchs, they go and meet into different sort of groups, a couple times a year, maybe 3, depending on who they are, and you always have to be invited. So 2 groups that people would be familiar with would be like you still there?
I am, yeah. I hear you.
Okay. My screen just flipped. So you have the Bilderbergers, which have the pureblood royals at the top who summon in the Bill Gates, the Clintons, all the up and risers, and they get their marching orders once a year. They connect into the Committee of 300 Families. The Davos community gets invited there as well. That's the merchant class and the technology class and the globalist environmental classes. They're mixed in, and they report back through Davos into the Committee of 300 as well. And that's not the top of the thelemic tree of the organizational royal bloodline orders. So, yeah, they're powerful, but they're not the power. If you see them as visible, they are not the invisible wealth. Let me put it to you that way.
Is it even? Is it the 10 houses are evenly distributed, so that 300 is 30 apiece?
Not really. I mean, you have organizational structures all over the world. So most people might be familiar with the 13 families. That's a term that's thrown out.
Sure.
Those aren't Rockefellers. Those aren't J.P. Morgans. Those are pseudo blue bloods. They are trying to intermarry through the generations into the bloodlines and for the children to have a higher level. This is the purity of the bloodlines, the purity of the ennobleness or the scioning or bapting in of other pure bloodlines is where you fit in. So above the Committee of 300 is the Council of 33 families of the West. And then there's the 13 families that's in Europe of the West. And then you have organizations, bloodlines all around the world. So you have a president in China today whose last name is Xi, X-I. In Chinese history, you had the dragon creator gods, the seraphim angels, create the world, create giants both before and after the flood and all of the kings. It comes down through the Shah dynasty, X-I-A, transliterated. Two main families of bloodlines in there is Li and Xi, X-I. So today we have a Western bloodline descendant, Xi, on the throne, who's in dynastic emperor building position right now. If we're in the fig tree generation, I think we might be. You've got, and he's pushing back against the European model, who uses the U.S. as their attack dogs to implement their policies. They don't accept the Western European bloodline model. In fact, they're still pissed because they sent social masonry, product they created in the 1800s, which developed socialism, communism, anarchism, and all of those far left-wing philosophies. They launched that virus onto China to bring down that bloodline dynasty so that the Europeans could impose their view. They did the same thing in Russia after World War I with communism. And that got out of control. But they took down the Putyanin bloodline, which was understood as the Romanov bloodline, but they were a junior offshoot through intermarriage in the 1600s with the original Putyanin branch that was set up in Moscow, that its head office or its central location is Kiev. Now, Putin believes he's of those bloodlines, as the newspaper stories in the early 2000s were creating his political mythos. Whether it's true or not, that's what he thinks. He honors Vladimir the Great, who set up the Putyanin dynasty in Moscow, and he's empire building. You're going to see more of this on the rise that's in the backgrounds to the wars as to what's going on. Putin doesn't accept the European model as well. It's not that they're against the New World Order that I like to call the Nephilim World Order, in jest, or the Nephilim Order. It's that they want a larger role.
So then if you believe the prophecy, isn't it good that members of the 10 or the 13 disagree endemically?
Well, they've always disagreed. There's a rival. There can only be one dynastic bloodline family that has Antichrist set up that dynastic reign for 1,000 years over the world. So directionally, they want the same thing, but they also want to have their own bloodline in. So even the European rival bloodlines are always in competition. I mean, that's one of the reasons for World War I, the inter-family warfare of cousins, that ended up bringing down the Putyanin bloodline through the Romanovs, the Kaiser bloodline, reduced the von Habsburg bloodline, the Bourbon family came down first in Spain. It was all done through setting off social masonry in Germany, Spain, Russia, and then at the end of World War II, or probably started even before, if you look from the history of the Communist Party rising up with Mao, into China.
But if you want to avoid
power.
if you want to avoid end times, keeping this conflict is good. The hawks are right, inadvertently or not.
Yeah, I mean, you could certainly look at it from that perspective. I mean, and from this perspective as icing on the cake for that is who would want to go through the end time? It's so horrific.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. I mean, no, nobody would want to. I mean, especially if there's a pretty good chance at some point, like a bunch of volcanoes going to rise from the Mid-Atlantic Ridge or whatever. Anyway, you know, or you know, one of those comets or asteroids will eventually hit us. But I mean, eventually could be 100 billion years. But
wants to happen yet? You can make a case that things may be geopolitically and the overages in the Roman Church with Protestantism and other religions, that there's things that are shaping up, but we're going to need significant catastrophes if we're going to bring about the last 7 years.
Okay, so perhaps I don't want to go too general hospital amicus Casanine, but if somebody developed some sort of weather machine or electromagnetic Tesla technology and created the catastrophes, perhaps the quote, air quotes, natural catastrophes would position the families to go, oh crap, we got to unite. And that could be the catalyst to get them together. So,
and the problem is, as the Davos community communicated this year, is that AI isn't where it needs to be. So you have and you were mentioning earlier that technology is the key for the end time, and the development of the angelic technology. The angels aren't going to give us the technology. They're going to give us the information to develop that technology, the fallen angels. So that needs to be developed. And they're having a doubling down on AI.
Oh, I'm terrified of AI.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's one thing, I know I have a show called Garden of Doom, but I'm generally not apocalyptic. I mean, I know that there are things that could trip nuclear Armageddon, but hopefully that wouldn't happen. But AI terrifies me because I think it will.
Who's involved in the development of AI, who likes it, should be forced to watch the Terminator movies every day, because everybody knows how this likely turns out.
Or just WALL-E, the Disney version, because basically that means you're going to need to have a minimum basic income, which is basically worldwide socialism. And I don't know how you create a minimum
socialism on a globalist scale.
Right, but I don't know how you raise money without taxes, because nobody can pay taxes if nobody's making money.
Well, it's not designed for most people to live well out of that. It's designed to recreate the old four-class system of the bloodlines, where they populated the top two. That included the leaders of the armies and the warriors. That included the oligarch system.
Right, the warriors, the priests, and the everybody else.
Priest class, and then you have two lower classes that made up of bakers, tailors,
farmers.
Very small, entrepreneurial, and not allowed to make a lot of money. Then you have the slave and labor class.
Right.
That's what they're trying to reinstitute. So policies designed to destroy the middle class are still particularly ongoing in the West to sort of make that happen.
All the names we know, like Millers, Carters, Smiths, Armstrong, all those are from trades.
And for people who want to watch what's going on, watch out, because everything's designed to cattle herd you into the open arms of the globalists who need a universal religion and this world religion and government to bring about their plans. So in polytheism, you have white hats and black hats. It's the dualism that I call the interior. So you have good witches, evil witches, good magic, black magic, all of that sort of terminology. The white hats are said to take a position, and they do, I think, to have a better view on humankind and don't want to hurt them in quite the same way as the black hats do, who want to wipe them from the face of the earth. You have to remember, though, they have the same pantheon and the same agenda. It's just the tactics of how they get there. That cattle herd effect. So let me bring that back to the reality of AI. So Elon Musk, who I like a lot, probably a white hat, says about Google, that's evil AI. And, there should be a 6-month recess, and everything that those guys are doing is evil. So what's his response to do that? I'm going to create my own AI company, and this is going to be good AI.
Right.
That's how they do things in politics, and in every type of science, any type of technology, to get you cattle herded into the same sort of direction. But AI has not developed as fast as they want. So they have this burgeoning technology of like cryptocurrency that can work in different dimensions, quantum computing, AI, which has not been moving along, digital medicines, and all sorts of other things that they want to merge together. But it has to be able to work in multiple dimensions, and only AI can do enough searches in multiple dimensions. That's why you have that working at places like CERN with quantum computing. And it has to go to a significant level to bring about the promised utopia that they say will come. Unfortunately, it's only going to bring dystopia.
So it's sort of the original dispute between the Anunnaki children gods. One wanted the flood to destroy everyone else. One wanted to keep the humans, but still as sort of their labor class with a nobility that was loyal.
And Enlil as offspring gods of Anu.
Right. Nothing changed since then.
White hat,
and black hat.
That's the internal dualism. The external dualism is the head of their pantheon is the equal of the God of the Bible. That's why you have this perpetual war, and then everything else plays down into the micro level and down to us and with the visible ones on the search. Now these Anunnaki, I'll just link a couple things in here for people.
Sure.
These are Sumerian aliens, or these are Sumerian gods, depending on how you want it.
Sure.
So on release, you get these really unique Anunnakis that have been kept down from prehistory, and they have really wide legs, really big feet, and they both have wings, and one has the head of a human that looks a lot like a Gilgamesh type of image,
right?
And another one has a face of an eagle,
right,
or a bird. Could be a raven, could be an owl, whatever you want it to be. So if they're aliens, okay, they're similar. They both have wings, and they're different beings. But biblically, they're the same angel. Biblically, these are cherubim,
right?
Watchers, just as seraphim are watchers, just as Ophanim are watchers, just as archangels are watchers. And cherubim have the face of an eagle, have the face of a human,
a bull, and a lion, right?
The face of a bull or an ox, depending on how you want to define that.
I'll go with bull.
When they take a physical body in the physical world, they take one of those faces, not all four.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see a sphinx or a cherub, it's going to have a face of a human, a lion, a bull, or like a gargoyle, like eagle, bird, raven, whatever you want to call it. Those are the single faces in the physical form. So if they wanted to reproduce, and if they were like the seraphim and they produced serpentine-looking offspring, which is why most of the ancient kings before the flood and early after the flood were depicted as serpents because they looked like seraphim, who are serpent-faced, six-winged angels. Then if they took the body with a lion face, they would produce lion-like people. So now in prehistory you get the Urmalulu and other types of lion-type men, whether it's in Sumeria, Greece, Egypt, and these were warrior Nephilim. Biblically, we get that from the lion men of Moab in the time of David, and the Gadite lion-like men, and then King Arioch out of Mesopotamia, who's part of the 4 king giant alliance. Arioch means lion-like. It is rooted in Aryan. If you take that etymology back.
And my favorite guy... my favorite guy, Enkidu. I mean, you could call him a lion man if you wanted to.
Yeah, Enki's typically depicted as a serpent, though, more of a serpent.
No, Enkidu, Gilgamesh's buddy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, both of them have black hair, big burly beards, and they're different than the red hair or the blonde-haired ones, and they're larger by Gilgamesh's size. So they seem to come from a different watcher probably through them, as I make the case for in book 2.
I have a terrifying thought. I'm not going to do it because it's going to. Because first of all, it's been 85 minutes. I think that's too generous with your time. We're both over 50, and we both probably have to go to the bathroom. And I want you to come back, and maybe I'll remember this question. But I would love for you to come back, and we'll just dedicate it to the bloodlines. But if I wasn't such a prolific booker, and if I wasn't booked all the way, consistently into June and sporadically past June, this would be my last show. Because this is the most Garden of Doom show. This covered everything. This covered prehistory, post-history, all of the gods, the bloodline, everything. This is the opus magnum of Garden of Doom shows, I believe, which of course, you probably think is a terrible thing because, but it is Garden of Doom. It's not Garden of Hope. So, I mean, I'm on brand. I mean, there's been no 3-card Monty, bait and switch here. Anyway, I can't thank you enough. Remind the folks where they can buy your books and otherwise find and support you and follow you.
Yeah, and I'll leave the audience with this biblical understanding, and it has a parallel in polytheism and different outcome. In the book of Ecclesiastes, it says, "Nothing is new under the sun. What was will be again."
Mm-hmm.
The beast empires of the post-Diluvian world are trying to repeat what happened in the antediluvian world. When we get into the days of Noah, that's when it all comes back together. So the best way to get a hold of me is through my website, Genesis6conspiracy.com, Genesis6conspiracy.com. And if you liked what I was saying and you want to get a little bit more information on the different kinds of angels or angels that produced lion warriors or dog warriors or whatever the topic, name it by topic. I send those documents out at no charge. So if there's something else about a document, if not, I'll just answer your question. It'll take me over a month to get back to you, probably 4 to 5 weeks, but I will get back to you. And go to my website to contact the author at the Genesis6conspiracy.com. And the best way to buy my book or pre-order the new book, which was first printing, has already oversold, and they're on the next run. It's got a March 12th release date. Hopefully Amazon starts shipping sooner because they received books last week. I'm still waiting for my shipment because it's oversold to do my pre-orders, but I'll have them out sometime in March to people. So you can also find a generous excerpt of all 98 chapters of book 1, all 84 chapters of book 2. If you think it's a whole book, you don't know me. My books are large, 700 pages for the second book, 800 for the first, and there is not a loose sentence or a loose paragraph in the whole book. It's all information coming at you all the time. And if you wanted to get a signed copy, go to the Buy Now, Buy From Author. I have a U.S. page, I have a Canada page, and I have an international page for the rest of the world for both books. And you can also link over from my website to Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, BarnesandNoble.com, and to the Kindle editions for both books. So that's the best way to get a hold of me or to get a hold of my book. That's the easiest way.
Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. Excellent. I'll hit you up later to see if you will agree and if we can schedule the date.
As like you, I'm looking into June as well, so anytime in the summer is fine, but only audio in the summer for me.
Well, that's fine. This is only an audio podcast, but people know I use Riverside, so we see each other. Anyway, all right. Thank you very much. Thanks to Gary Wayne for being on the show again. Guys, buy his book, books, plural. Even if you don't believe all of these things, it's still great information to have and to understand it, because a lot of people do, and a lot of people believe different versions of it, and it's probably best if you want to try to. You can't argue with people and say, "No, you're dumb. That's all a fairy tale." No, if you know the actual real version, then you can actually have a discussion with people on their own terms and level, and maybe correct certain parts, and maybe we're not within doom, which, I think that what is unsaid here is that if people work against certain things, that we can defer, delay, or avoid it entirely. And, not all prophecies have to come true. So, I guess I just violated my rule of going on brand. I guess that's a little hope there, but, hopefully you'll forgive me. I slip every now and then. All right. Thanks again, Gary, for being on the show. Thanks for listening. Give us a 5-star review. 5-star rating. Give us a nice little review and tell your friends. And, you'll hear from us again next week in the Garden of Doom.
Driving around from one end of this town to the other and back, but no one's ever seen us driving our Econoline van, and no one's ever heard of our band. We're the Mesopotamians, Sargon, Hammurabi, Ashurbanipal, and Gilgamesh, and they wouldn't understand a word we say, so we'll scratch it all down into the clay, half believing there will sometime come a day someone gives a damn, maybe when the concrete has crumbled to sand. We're the Mesopotamians, Sargon, Hammurabi, Ashurbanipal, and Gilgamesh. The Mesopotamish sun is beating down and making cracks in the ground, but there's nowhere else to stand in Mesopotamia, the kingdom where we secretly reign, the land where we invisibly rule as the Mesopotamians, Sargon, Hammurabi, Ashurbanipal, and Gilgamesh. This is my last stick of gum. I'm gonna cut it up so everybody else gets some, except for Ashurbanipal, who says my haircut makes me look like a Mohenjo-Daran. Hey, Ashurbanipal, I'm a Mesopotamian.